Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Chronicles of the Caliphate, the rise, reign, and ruin of Islam's first empires. I'm your host, Ham of Jadrozia. High in the mountains of southern Arabia, in a fertile wadi, nestled along an oasis, was a small town with a big dream. Straddling a crossroads of trade routes that darted north, which took the most precious stones and the most fragrant incense to the great cities. The trade routes also brought down wealth, prestige, and strange ideas. The prophet Ezekiel, in his lamentations over Tyre and Lebanon, reminded them of their false pride and transient riches, all begotten from their trade with the far ends of Arabia. Dedan traded with you in saddlecloths for riding. Arabia and all the princes of Kedar were your favorite dealers in lambs, rams, and goats. In these they did business with you. The merchants of Sheba and Ramah traded with you. They exchanged for your wares the best of all kinds of spices and all precious stones and gold. Haran, Canaan, Eden, the merchants of Sheba, Asher, Chilmad traded with you. An important hub of this vast network of trade between the Levant, Mesopotamia, and Arabia was Ramah, the ancient town I spoke of, the ancient name for the city of Najran, today on the Saudi-Yemeni border. Najran remained influential throughout late antiquity. Its trading partners changed from Tyre, Babylon, and Asher to Alexandria, Constantinople, and Ctesiphon. Its rulers changed from Sheba to Himyar. Its religion changed from worshipping a great sky god to proclaiming Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. Sources are not clear how Christianity reached that far south in Arabia. The trade routes must have had something to do with it. Whether it was a Christian merchant peddling his wares, physical and spiritual, to the people of Najran, or a Christian slave with a saintly halo performing miracles and mass conversions. Najran became the center of South Arabian Christianity by the late 5th century, just around the time when their overlords in the city of Dhafar, near Sana'a, became Jewish. The kings of Himyar, a branch of southern Arabian Qahtanid nation, ruled over a mighty kingdom. At their peak, it stretched from the mountains and valleys of Yemen to central Arabia and even to the Euphrates in the north. Perhaps fearing their southern neighbors, the Christian Axum in Abyssinia, or the ever-encroaching northern Arabs and the Roman patrons, also Christian, or mayhap trying to forge closer ties with their favored empire, the Sassanids of Persia. The kings of Himyar saw Judaism as a good fit. Around the early 5th century, a Himyarite king named Abu Karib led his army far north in Hijaz in a campaign of conquest. He sieged the oasis of Yathrib. He burnt all their palm trees to force the town to surrender. The people defending Yathrib, a mixture of Arabs and Jews, they fought bravely, and Abu Karib was in for the long haul. During the siege, the king fell sick. The Yathribians saw an opportunity to end the siege, not through a counterattack, but through medical diplomacy. They sent forth 2 men, Ka'b and Asad, 2 learned rabbis, to treat the king and persuade him to lift the siege. They were more successful than they hoped. Abu Karib recovered. He took a keen interest in these 2 rabbis, and at the end of the day, he, along with his army, converted to Judaism. Like the Christians of Najran, we are not sure what kind of Judaism he converted to, or even if it really was Judaism and not some Jewish-flavored monotheism. What is clear, though, that the rock inscriptions from the late 4th century suddenly proclaim the Lord of heavens and earth, of Israel and Jews, as their protector and sovereign. The sudden rise of a Jewish monarchy in Yemen, while Najran elevated to being the great church in the south, did not bode well for the fortunes of Himyar. By the year 517, a great-grandson of Abu Karib led a coup and captured the throne of Himyar. Yusuf As'ar Yath'ar was his name. Dhu Nuwas was his moniker, the one with the long side locks. King Dhu Nuwas refused to tolerate a Christian presence in his realm. More so, he felt that Axum in Abyssinia posed a great threat to him and his rule. These Christians in his land owed their loyalty to the Negus, the king of Axum. He rounded up the Abyssinian Christians in his capital and put them to the sword. He proceeded to gather his army and march towards Najran around the year 523. The memory of Saint Stephen the Protomartyr, the first Christian martyr who was stoned to death by the Jewish authorities in Jerusalem, according to the Book of Acts, that memory must have echoed loudly in the churches of Najran as the Jewish king of Himyar laid siege. The Christian leader of Najran, Al-Harith bin Ka'b, venerated as Saint Arithas, urged his people to hold their faith firm, that salvation was at hand. Dhu Nuwas stood outside the city gates. The heretics of Jesus have long wrought corruption upon the land. He vowed to his Lord that he will not let this stand any longer. The siege is said to have lasted several months. The might of Himyar bore down on the city walls. The city fell in a great fire and destruction. Its people massacred, its churches burned. Dhu Nuwas stood on the rubble and praised his God. Some 300 of the city's people were gathered in front of the king, the last survivors of a proud people. The king pointed at the raging fires all around him and told Al-Harith to renounce his Jesus. Al-Harith held his faith firm and said to the king, "To die for Christ is to find life. As a vine pruned at the correct time gives a good yield of fruit, God will multiply the Christians in this city. The church which was burnt down will be raised up." Dhu Nuwas' anger raged as the fires around him. He had his men dig a large trench. All the debris from the fallen city were cast in it and lit on fire. He bound the 90-year-old Al-Harith, and he bound children as young as 3. He bound the women, the men, and all those who defied him, and pushed them to the raging inferno. To die for Christ is to find life. A rock inscription outside Najran, written in Sabaean, proclaims this mighty conquest of Dhu Nuwas. "The Lord who owns the heavens and the earth, bless King Yusuf As'ar Yath'ar, king of all nations, and bless his loyal nobles, those who stood with their king when he burned the churches and killed the Abyssinians in Dhafar and warred upon them in the lands of Ash'aran, Rakban, Farasan. The king vanquished his enemies. He killed 12,500 and captured 11,900. He pillaged and looted 200,000 camels, cows, and sheep." By the year 524, the news of this slaughter spread across Arabia. Some sources claimed that it was spread by Dhu Nuwas himself. He wrote a letter to the king in Al-Hira in Mesopotamia, boasting of his deeds and urging him to follow suit and massacre all the Christians. For one reason or another, the Lakhmid king of Al-Hira read the letter to his court, which included ambassadors from Constantinople and Ctesiphon. It wasn't long till Emperor Justinian the Great heard about what happened to Al-Harith. The emperor, defender of the Christian faith, wrote to the Negus of Axum, Caleb, to invade Himyar and supplied him with a Roman contingent. Dhu Nuwas' fears self-actualized. The Abyssinian forces crossed the sea and chased Dhu Nuwas through the mountains of Yemen. The king of Himyar was eventually caught on the coast of the Red Sea, close to Aden. Fearing his capture, he rode his horse into the sea. With his last breath, he ended the long line of the Arab kings in Yemen. Negus Caleb appointed an Arab who converted to Christianity as his viceroy in Himyar, a man named Sumayfa Ashwa al-Yazani, who was known to the Greeks as Isimiphaios. There was a certain wisdom by Axum to appoint a native son as the ruler of Himyar. Sumayfa was, after all, a military leader in Dhu Nuwas' army, although sources differ on whether he was forced by the king to fight his enemies or whether he betrayed his lord to the invader for the promise of wealth and power. In any case, his brief rule was not remarkable beside an episode that a Roman historian recorded. At the time when Caleb was reigning over the Axumites and Sumayfa over the Himyarites, the Emperor Justinian sent an ambassador, Julianus, demanding that both nations, on account of their community of religion, should make common cause with the Romans in their war against the Persians. The Romans had a plan that both Axum and Himyar provide arms and men to their ally, an Arab prince named Qaisus by the Romans. His name would have been Qais in Arabic. A side note, the story of this Qais mirrors that of a legendary Arab named Imru al-Qais, the greatest warrior poet in pre-Islamic Arabia. If my listeners are interested in the story of the exiled king, as he was called, who roamed Arabia seeking vengeance for his murdered father, who reached Constantinople and sought an alliance with the emperor of the Romans, all the while singing ballads to the most beautiful women in the desert, whom all fell in love with him, let me know in the comments below. More on this at the end. Returning to our story, the historian who recorded this tripartite alliance continues. As for the Himyarites, it was desired that they should establish Qais, the fugitive, as captain over the Ma'ad tribes, with a great army of their own people and of the Ma'ads, make an invasion into the land of the Persians. This Qais was by birth of the captain's rank, an exceptionally able warrior, but he killed one of the relatives of Sumayfa and was a fugitive in a land which is so utterly destitute of human habitation. So each king, Caleb and Sumayfa, promising to put this demand into effect, dismissed the ambassador, but neither one of them did the things agreed upon by them. During the 530s, the reign of Sumayfa was cut short. An Aksumite general garrisoned in Dhofar, the capital of Himyar, led a coup against the Arab ruler, Abraha the Abyssinian, as the chroniclers called him. Axum tried to oust him multiple times, but were unable. They eventually agreed to allow Abraha to become the king in Yemen in exchange for vassalage. Abraha will play a significant role during the siege of Mecca in the year of the birth of Muhammad. But we will end the story here for now, leaving Abraha and his elephants for a future episode. So by the mid-6th century, Arabia stood at a crossroads, faiths clashing, kingdoms rising and falling, and the land still waiting for an empire to come. One of the most problematic aspects of the early years of Islam is the insistence of Islamic chroniclers that the Arabs lived in Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance. Ignorance of God, of morals, of basic human decency. Ignorance of civilization? The chroniclers relay that the Arabs were universally pagan, idol worshippers, idols they inherited from their ancestors. Yet, the earliest revelations of the Quran are full of stories about the biblical patriarchs and prophets. This comes with the expectation that the intended audience, the pagan Arabs in Mecca, knew these stories well. The flood of Noah, the binding of Abraham's son, the parting of the sea by Moses. Scholars found it hard to marry these early narratives of the Quran with the polytheistic beliefs of the Arabs in the 7th century. It turns out that the Arabian desert, ironically, was a fertile ground for what was deemed heretical in Judeo-Christian traditions. Najran is only 800 kilometers south of Mecca, established on a very important trade route between the Levant and Yemen, passing by Mecca ever so conveniently. There are narratives that Muhammad met with the Christian priests from Najran. To the north of Mecca was Yathrib. It became Medina, the first capital of Islam, and it was the center of Arabian Judaism up till the arrival of Muhammad there. Then you have the Kingdom of Himyar, with its Jewish monarchs waging religious wars all over. The thing that is missing is what kind of Judaism or Christianity was practiced in these remote corners of Arabia. Rabbinical Judaism and Catholic Christianity were still in their formative years in late antiquity, and it seemed that everyone who didn't follow the orthodoxy made a place for them in the desert. Just a few kilometers from where I live, they found an ancient Nestorian church. They say it is the oldest Christian building in Eastern Arabia. Nestorianism was a heretical Christian sect. This goes as well to Saint Arithas al-Harith, who was killed in Najran. Some sources claim that he was a Miaphysite, a sect that rejected certain doctrinal Christology relating to the nature of Christ from mainstream Christianity. Therefore, he was considered a heretic at the time. One can take this even further. To the Jewish rabbis and Christian priests, this newly minted faith called Islam was nothing more than another heresy born out of the desert sun, a belief that was prevalent all the way to the Middle Ages. The Quran itself takes a strange position on all this. In chapter 85, it records the massacre of the Christians in Najran. It declared that these Trinitarian Christians were the true believers, while those who committed these atrocities, the Jewish monotheists, were damned in the eyes of Allah. By the sky containing great stars, and by the promised day, and by the witness and what is witnessed, destroyed were the companions of the trench, containing the fire full of fuel when they were sitting near it. And they, to what they were doing against the believers, were witnesses. And they resented them not except because they believed in Allah the exalted in might, the praiseworthy, to whom belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. And Allah, over all things, is witness. Indeed, those who have tortured the believing men and women and then have not repented have the punishment of hell, and they will have the punishment of the burning fire. In 2023, the Catholic Church, represented by the Apostolic Vicar of Northern Arabia, celebrated the extraordinary jubilee of the martyrdom of Saint Arethas of Najran and his companions. Before we end this episode, I want to return to that side note I mentioned earlier about the warrior poet Imru al-Qais. As I relay this epic story of Islam's first empires, I'll come across certain people, events, and ideas that merit a further expansion for the mere prospect of understanding the histories all the better. They might not fit neatly in the stories I want to tell, but they have their place in literary, philosophical, or biographical histories that feed into the larger narrative. As such, I propose that I start an addendum series where every now and then these subjects can be expounded in dedicated episodes. My fellow travelers in the caravanserai, let me know in the comments if such addendums appeal to you and would like to hear more about them, such as our friend Imru al-Qais. Now we come to the end of this episode. Next time, we travel north to Mesopotamia, to the ancient city of Al-Hira, to the kings of Lachm, to the great allies of mighty Persia, their stories, and their reign that shaped the early empire of Islam. This has been Chronicles of the Caliphate. I'm Ham of Jadrosia. Until next time, walk carefully through the sands of empire.